The lowest prices with free shipping. Order online or call now.
Even if you found there was abuse in this case, no abuse, some abuse, a lot of abuse, it doesn't make any difference. You can still find Cody Posey guilty of first-degree murder.
Do you think you would have tolerated it one time, much less 7 years? 7 years. The state says to you this case is not about abuse. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the abuse.
We are back with our continuing coverage of jury deliberations in the Cody Posey case. As we wait to hear Cody Posey's fate, which closing argument do you think left the strongest impression? Let's ask the panel. All right, Paula, let me bring you in. Both sides, I think, truly believe in the justice of their case at this point. Gary Mitchell even admitted on our air today that he cried during his closing argument. How effective is that?
Well, I actually thought Gary Mitchell gave a great argument, and to me, comparing the two arguments, his felt like the truest argument, and really the case that he presented felt the most true. And so to me that was very compelling. And the fact that he identifies emotionally, is attached to his client, I also think is going to work to his client's advantage to keep the focus on the state of mind of that boy. And the other thing I wanted to say, I think he did a great job, especially in his investigation, because it was Gary Mitchell's computer, examinations that turned up all those incest pornography that corroborated, what had happened the night before to that poor kid, to have been, have to incest with his stepmother. That is so terrible.
Well, that's
so
a
I
great
think
point.
He did a great job.
And we know that witnesses don't just sprout on your desk
right.
in your office. You got to go out and find them. Some defense attorneys do, some don't.
Right.
Same for prosecutors. Let's take a closer look at Gary Mitchell's closing argument.
In the end, he testifies and he tells you, I wasn't thinking. I wasn't thinking. And that makes good and logical sense to us now, knowing the rest of the story and the abuse that had taken place over all of these years and what had happened the night before.
He takes out the snake shot and he replaces it with .38 caliber cartridges. He's thinking. And what is he thinking? Snake shot isn't going to kill them. And I intend to kill them. I intend for them to be dead. And that snake shot isn't going to do the job.
Carolyn, I've read studies that most jurors make up their minds during opening statements, which is a little bit scary. How important are closing arguments in jurors' minds?
I think it's very important. I mean, the opening statement, yes, you know what it is? It's like the framework. It gives you a place to put all the evidence that's coming. And if you make a strong opening statement, if you're clear, if they understand what you said, if your themes are all lined up, and then you go ahead and give them what you promised throughout the trial, yeah, it's really important. But if you're still up in the air and you don't know how to assimilate what you've heard throughout the trial, the closing can be the chance to tell you where to put all that. Now, in terms of the performances, I think the defense attorney did as good a job as he could. He was very likable, very genuine. I think the jurors really did connect with him, whereas the prosecution really didn't show a whole lot of sympathy. I think that was a big mistake throughout the whole trial, because as we said, the abuse it's all over the place, so why not acknowledge it, show sympathy, but still argue your points? Because when you come right down to it, I mean, here we are with a 14-year-old, with the hardest argument being the 14-year-old killing a 13-year-old.
Right.
What do you do with that morally? And I think that's probably what the jurors are going to struggle with the most during this deliberation.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Joe, the early reviews are in. We've spoken to the alternates who were dismissed. They said they thought the prosecution's closing was, quote, boring, long-winded, too repetitive. Are those just style points, or do you think that could have an effect on the verdict?
Oh, of course it could have an effect on the verdict. I mean, style points are part of the message. I mean, it's the messenger who has to be clear and concise. And if the jurors aren't in tune with that messenger, if you will, is saying. If they're not buying the arguments and they're turning off because they don't like the delivery or because they're just not being persuasive in their oratorical presentation, yeah, that goes to a long way to what they look. Jurors go back there, and the closing arguments, what in my mind, what they really do is just give the jurors who are on your side the ability and the ammunition to articulate their points.
Give them something to argue back in the jury room.
And if they're not persuasive in closing arguments, it's hard for those jurors to be persuasive in the jury room. So, yeah, that's very important.
And Carolyn, just in the few seconds we have before we go to break, how much significance do you give to what the alternates are saying now? After all, of course, they haven't deliberated.
I think it's very telling. I mean, it shows what it was like for someone who was in the courtroom as opposed to outside, how it felt, how it, they both said that they had a lot, it seems like they had a lot of sympathy for Cody Posey, that the abuse excuse wasn't offensive to them, and with respect to the father, they were willing to at least find manslaughter or even acquit. What they didn't seem to be as clear about was, like, I hate to keep telling like a broken record, but I think it's whether or not these jurors are going to be comfortable, and whether they would have been comfortable having him, go home, if you will, having done what he did to the others. Was that collateral damage?
Yeah.
Does this POW, I was in the heat of the moment thing going to work? I think that's why they're going to focus so much on his demeanor, on what he did during and after the crimes. I think that's where it's going to sit. And yeah, I do think what they're saying is telling in terms of the emotional aspect.
Both of them, it really struck me that both of them said, I'm so glad I got released from this jury. It is such a hard case. Usually in a high-profile case, the juries have sat on for a long time. When they're released, they say, oh, I really wanted to be in this case. I really wanted to deliberate. We're not seeing that here. Well, after the break, I will read some of your emails on the Cody Posey case, so don't go away. And still ahead, a convicted child rapist gets a 40-year sentence. But get this, he never committed the crime. DNA expert Barry Scheck shares another fascinating story from the Innocence Project later on in the show. Don't go away.